Hi friends, hope you are fine. At the end of the discussion, you will be able to understand the major plant groups from algae to angiosperms with key characteristics and life cycle. Let's begin with algae. First, let us see some algae before moving into the details. Absolutely diverse group of photosynthetic organisms, as you see, ranging from single cells to multicellular organisms to giant seaweeds, often called as kelps. They are found in a variety of habitats including freshwater, saltwater, and soil, mostly aquatic. They lack true roots, stem, and leaves, therefore called as pteridophytes. They reproduce by spores or by means of sexual reproduction like fragmentation. Sexual reproduction is also there. They are the major producers of oxygen, contributing majority of oxygen, making this planet habitable. Algae exhibit different types of life cycle. So we'll be looking into some typical types of life cycle with examples, starting with the haplontic life cycle, as you see in the case of Ulothrix. So this is a filamentous algae. So one of the cell produces gametes. Haploid gametes are formed. Here the plant body is haploid, filamentous algae. So this gametes undergoes fertilization to form zygote. Zygote undergoes meiosis, forming zoospores. They are called as zoospores because they are flagellated motile spores. And this zoospores moves in water, attaches to a substratum and grows the new filament. So as you see in this life cycle, the only phase where there is diploid phase is a zygote. Therefore, this is a haploid dominant life cycle called as haplontic life cycle. Now let us see a second type of life cycle, which is called as diplohaplontic life cycle, where both diploid phase and haploid phase are equally dominant. So this is laminaria, which is a seaweed, belongs to brown algae or Phaeophyceae. As you see, sporophyte is well developed with leaf-like structures and root-like structures. So this is a pseudoparenchymatous, made up of pseudoparenchymatous cells. Then this structure forms sporangia. Sporangia undergoes inside sporangia and cells undergoes meiosis, forming zoospores. Zoospores are motile spores that give rise to female gametophyte and male gametophyte. Female gametophyte forms the egg or female gamete, and male gametophyte forms the sperm or male gamete. And that fuses to form the zygote. Zygote undergoes mitosis and later form again this sporophytic diploid plant. So in this life cycle, as you see, there is a sporophytic diploid phase and a gametophytic haploid phase. Both phases are equally dominant, therefore the life cycle is called diplohaplontic life cycle. One more point is this sporophyte is morphologically different from gametophyte, therefore the alternation of generation is called as heteromorphic or different, morphologically different sporophyte and gametophyte. Now let us see one more major type of life cycle, that is in algae. This is sargassum, where you can see the plant body is sporophyte, well-developed seaweed. There is a sea named after sargassum, which is called as Sargasso Sea in Atlantic Ocean. This sargassum, a floating seaweed that provides an ecosystem for a variety of organisms. So in this life cycle, this sporophytic plant produces male receptacle, a structure that forms male gamete, and female receptacle, a structure that forms female gamete or egg. And this male gamete and female gamete fuses to form the zygote, and zygote later forms a jamblings with flagella, and that swims in water, attaches to a suitable substratum using rhizoids, and finally give rise to the sporophytic plant again. So as you see in this life cycle, the only haploid phase is in gametes. So gametes are the only haploid structures. So this is a life cycle where diploid phase is dominant, therefore called as diplobiontic life cycle. So from these three life cycles, now you know that algae is extremely complex group, diverse group of photosynthetic organisms, which are pteridophytes, ranging from single cellular organisms, filamentous organisms, and finally to giant kelps that spreads hundreds of miles in oceans. Now moving into the next group, which is the bryophytes. First, let us see some bryophytes. Before moving into their characteristics, they form beautiful miniature forests. They are non-vascular plants. Gametophytic phase is dominant, includes mosses, liverworts, and hornworts, typically found in moist, shady habitats. They lack true roots, stems, and leaves, but have specialized structures called rhizoids that is meant for absorption and anchorage, reproduce by spores, or sexual reproduction is there. Then there is gemme, then fragmentation. Asexual reproduction methods are many. They are the important decomposers. They play an important role in soil formation. They are involved in ecological succession as pioneer communities. And they are pollution indicators, many roles in an ecosystem. Let's take the life cycle of moss to understand the characteristics of bryophytes. So this is one of the most advanced type of bryophyte. As you see, this moss is having a leafy gametophyte with root-like structures, which is called as rhizoids. So there are male gametophyte and female gametophyte. So haploid gametophytic phase is dominant. So this male gametophyte forms antheridium, the reproductive structure. Inside sperm or male gamete is formed, whereas female gametophyte forms archegonium. Inside egg is formed, or female gamete is formed. So after fertilization, the zygote develops. It becomes embryo. Later it develops into a sporophyte that divides by mitosis and forms a sporophyte, which is made up of a food, an elongated seta, and a capsule that contains spores. So this is a sporophyte. So in bryophyte, this sporophyte is dependent on the gametophyte, as you see. So this is a leafy structure is a gametophyte, and sporophyte is dependent and attached to the gametophyte. So inside this capsule, spores are formed by meiosis. Then the spores are released. Then again, the gametophytic phase starts. The spores forms rhizoids and buds, attaches to a suitable substratum, and this early stage is called as protonema. Then it gives rise to gametophyte, male and female gametophyte respectively. So we have given a detailed video on classification of bryophytes. You can refer that for more. So this is about bryophytes. They are non-vascular plants with a dominant gametophytic phase. Now moving into the next group, pteridophytes. Pteridophytes are well known for its beautiful foliage. As you can see, they are absolutely beautiful plants. So this is a group of vascular plants with a dominant sporophyte. Includes ferns, horsetails, and club mosses. These plants have true roots, stem, and leaves, as you see. This is a fern. They reproduce by spores, fragmentation, and many other methods of asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction by different type. Sexual reproduction is also there. Dominant plant life on Earth during the Carboniferous period. So let us understand the life cycle of fern to understand the characteristics of pteridophyte. As you see, this pteridophyte fern, it is having a rhizomatous stem, then leaf, then roots. The leaves are called the frond, and there is a tendency, the coiling of leaf is there, which is called as cercinate vernation. Then you can see on the underside of the leaf there is sori, or grouping of sporangia is called as sori. Clusters of sporangia. Inside that sporangium, cells undergoes meiosis, forming spores, and these spores are released. So this is a diploid sporophyte. By meiosis, haploid spores are formed, and the spores germinate to form the gametophyte. First gametophyte forms a rhizoid. Later, the mature gametophyte is often very small. With rhizoids, it forms antheridium and archegonium. Antheridium is a structure that forms the male gamete or sperm cells, whereas archegonium is a structure that forms the female gamete. And this male gamete fuses with egg. And finally, a zygote is formed inside archegonium. And zygote divides by mitosis. And again forms the sporophytic plant. Here also there is alternation of generation between gametophytic phase and sporophytic phase. So let me summarize. In the case of pteridophytes, the sporophytic phase is dominant and these are vascular plants, and gametophyte is very much reduced. The gametophyte is independent and is very much reduced. Now moving into the next group, the gymnosperms. Let us see some gymnosperms before moving into the characteristics. They are a group of seed-bearing vascular plants. Like pteridophytes, they are having a dominant sporophyte, tall trees. The tallest plant is the redwood tree, which is the sequoia plant. It's called as giant redwood tree. Gymnosperms include conifers, cycads, and ginkgos, have true roots, stem, and leaves. Tall plants, often trees, produce naked seeds which are not enclosed in a fruit. They are the dominant plant life on Earth during the Mesozoic period, still dominant vegetation in many temperate zones. Now let us take an example to understand the life cycle of gymnosperms. In the case of pinus, as you see, this is the sporophytic plant. The sporophytic plant produces male cone and female cone. So this is the female cone and this is the male cone. And this female cone produces inside the ovule megaspore mother cell, forms megaspore, whereas inside microsporangia meiosis takes place and pollen grains are formed. Then of the 4 megaspores, one survives. And inside the archegonium, sperm cells and egg cells fuses to form the zygote. Zygote develops by mitosis to form an embryo, later forms a seed, and seed germinates to form the sporophytic plant. Sporophytic phase is the dominant phase and gametophytic phase is dependent on the sporophytic phase. And finally, angiosperms. Angiosperms are the most diverse groups of plants on Earth. They are having a dominant sporophyte. They are well known for its beautiful flowers. They include flowering plants, grasses, trees, herbs, etc. They have true roots, stem, and leaves. They produce seeds enclosed in a fruit. This group of plants first appeared during the Cretaceous period. Now let us see the life cycle to understand angiosperms. So we have given a detailed video on the life cycle of angiosperms. You can refer that. So as you see, flower is a reproductive structure, stamen is a male reproductive structure, and pistil or carpel is a female reproductive structure. Stamen, there is anther. Inside anther, microspore mother cell undergoes meiosis, forming microspores or pollen grains. Whereas ovary, inside ovary there are ovules where megaspore mother cell undergoes meiosis, forming an embryo sac with egg cells. As you see, this is the egg cells and these are polar nuclei. So this is the embryo sac with egg cells. Then this pollen grains falls on the stigma of this flower and it germinates, and releasing the male nucleus, it fuses with the egg to form the zygote. Later it develops into a seed with seed coat, endosperm, and embryo. After fertilization, and finally it germinates and gives rise to a sporophytic plant. The angiosperms are further divided into monocots and dicots. Monocots are with a single cotyledon in the seed, means cotyledon are embryonic leaves, whereas dicots with 2 cotyledon, 2 embryonic leaves. Then monocots are often having long narrow leaf with parallel venation, whereas dicots with broad leaf with reticulate venation. Regarding the anatomy, monocots are where vascular bundles are scattered, whereas vascular bundles are arranged in a ring in the case of dicots. Monocots, the floral parts are in the multiples of 3, whereas in dicots, floral parts are in the multiples of 4 or 5. So this is a summary of angiosperms. So we have given a detailed video on the life cycle of angiosperms, including a special emphasis on double fertilization. You can refer that for more. Let me summarize the classification of plants. Plants that is undifferentiated forms the algae or thallophytes. Differentiated plants without specialized vascular tissue forms the bryophytes with a dominant gametophytic phase with vascular tissue that do not produce seeds forms the pteridophytes, which are vascular plants that do not produce seeds, whereas that produce seeds forms the phanerogams that forms naked seeds forms the Gymnosperms with a dominant sporophyte, whereas that bears seeds and fruits forms the Angiosperms with a dominant sporophytic phase. Angiosperms are further divided based on the number of cotyledons into dicots and monocots. Dicots with 2 cotyledons or embryonic leaves, whereas monocots with a single cotyledon or an embryonic leaf.